and welcome to episode 11 of Total Pop Mode. My name is Will, and I also go by Hoodafunk, and I'm joined here once again and always by my good friend, podcast host, and fellow gaming enthusiast, James.
What's going on, you voluptuous vampiric voles? So before we start, I can't help but notice that you brought a friend with you to the pod this week.
Oh yeah, well, this is my new friend who I mentioned last week on the pods. He's been helping me with my problem. It's cool, buddy. Chill. Sorry, go on, James.
Okay. It's a bit weird there. What problem's that?
What problem? What do you mean, what problem? My thumb, man. You know, the possessed f***ing appendage that I now have to deal with on a daily basis. It's pretty hurtful that this isn't a little higher on your priority of things to remember.
My bad, man. I mean, I didn't think it was a huge deal. I thought you might have come to accept your new pal by now. Oh, what the f*** was that?
Oh, yeah, he says that the thumb definitely shouldn't be called a pal.
You can understand this guy?
I picked up a few words after we had those drinks a few weeks ago.
Right. Okay, then. What does he mean when he said it shouldn't be called a pal?
Yeah, buddy. It's all good. I got this. Well, James, it's more of a kind of evil spirit. My new buddy here may have been a little tipsy when he performed the procedure last week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that much is obvious.
And he might have accidentally let something slip in during the process.
And what exactly do you mean by something? For f***'s sake, shut up, will you? I can't understand a word you're saying.
It's cool, man. Chill. He's just a little jealous of our new thing.
Whatever, man.
Anyway, I'm not sure what it actually is. Something about an evil force corrupting and consuming everything good. You know, pretty standard, uninspired writer type stuff.
I mean, I have no idea what you mean, man. Gotta say, though, I'm disappointed that this has bled over. I'm kind of bummed you decided to drag this one out.
Drag this one out?
But, now there's talk of evil forces and dark overcoming good, and, that all sounds pretty metal, actually. It's kind of cool.
Oh, you want to hear metal? Check out what the thumb's been up to in the meantime.
Oh, I kind of dig that.
I know, man. I know. It is pretty badass. But my guy here gets upset if we talk about it too positively, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, if this thing really is a force of evil or something, I imagine it's probably best if we, deal with the problem directly.
Oh, no way, man. I don't have to learn how to use a special controller. It's my good gaming hand, man. Anyways, this thing must have an aimbot in it or something, because I have been clearing house lately.
Okay, priorities, I get it. Is it possible to actually, exercise it or something?
I don't know, man. I've been winning all kinds of matches in Splitgate with this thing.
Well, that may be true, but we can't just continue the podcast with you with a possessed thumb and a crazy shaman brer in the background. I just can't do it, man.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry, but there's just some lines that I won't cross. I'm sorry.
Come on, man.
And besides, mate, you sounded well up for the whole exorcism thing.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, shaman bro, what do we need to do? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cool.
Unexpected.
Makes sense.
That's very interesting.
All right, cool. Got it. That doesn't sound too bad.
Wait, you can understand him too now?
It's really not that hard once you've listened to it for a little bit, Anyways, I think we can probably scrounge most of this stuff from where we are now. Let's go have a look.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Some soul candles, sage, blood of a virgin.
Blood of a virgin?
Ooh. Couple spiders, garlic. Yep. Got all those. Okay, man, I think we're all good to go.
Sweet. Let's do this. Shall we begin?
Let's do it, man. Okay, did we just read this? Okay, right. Evil spirit, f*** off please, release this thumb and let us be. Evil spirit, f*** off please, release this thumb and let us be.
Evil spirit, off please. Release the stun and let's be. Evil spirit, off please. Release the stun and let us be. Man, what the hell? No way, dude. He just shot that thing.
Wow.
I mean, is that even meant to work? Is that possible?
I guess shamans have moved with the times a little.
No shit. Well, I mean, it's clearly dead now. On with the show?
On with the show. Oh, shit. Yeah. This is kind of awkward. Now that my thumb's not possessed, I really feel like I don't need a shaman buddy. I mean, it's kind of a bad look. All the dead animals you carry around and stuff. Basically, unintelligible speech.
And we only have 2 mics. You know, mic sharing on a podcast isn't really ideal.
And let's be honest, three's kind of a crowd. I think it's time we parted ways, buddy. No hard feelings. Don't worry. You know the way out.
Yeah, nice meeting you, man. Hey, before you go though, you got a card or anything like that? Nice one, fella. Kiss it here. Nice. Well, that was interesting. Anyway, on with the show for reals this time?
On with the show, bro. You can, as always, find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts by searching for Total Pod Mode. We also post regular video content of our playthroughs, stream highlights, as well as the podcast on our YouTube channel, Total Pod Mode.
You can also find us on Twitter by searching for @TotalPodMode, all one word.
Or you can find me at Whodafunk on Twitter, and I'm also on Twitch under twitch.tv/Whodafunk.
And you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Bames, and I'm also on Twitch under twitch.tv/MrBames_TPM.
With that said, James, how about we have a bit of a catch up? Okay, James, as you well know, I've been busy with your challenge this week, so why don't you kick us off with what you've been playing this week?
Not a problem, man. I actually, for once, didn't have a flitty week this week.
Oh, you've actually had a dedicated gamer session.
I was locked in. I was focused. I've made a little list. I say a little list. I've made a list of games that I've started and haven't finished. And the goal is to get through those before buying new games, really. But I'm about to completely contradict myself in a sec. But
I love the backlogs. I like it.
Yes.
I like it. It sounds good.
One of the games that was on the list that I've been meaning to finish again, because I have finished this game previously, is a game called Greedfall.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before.
So Greedfall is another game by Spiders, who I've said in previous episodes that I'm a massive fan of these guys. They make great RPGs in my opinion. And this one is one of their better ones. It's essentially a game about colonialization. You play a prince in the merchant congregation.
Okay.
And you and your allies are from the old world, in inverted commas. And basically you're setting sail to colonize new islands and, you know, set up new camps, expand your influence, as it were. So for a bit of context, this is set in 1800-y type times, you know, so we're talking wooden boats. They've got guns, but it's swords,
Flintlocks and muskets and things.
Yeah,
what kind of guns?
It's that sort of deal. It's those old school elegant pistols that you sort of load like that.
Yeah.
And then they do have rifles and muskets and things like that, but obviously it's not quite as much of a faff as having to hold up the thing, pour gunpowder in and stuff it back down. But it's that sort of fare, you know, cannons, colonial sort of pirates, that sort of vibe, right?
Okay.
And, you know, there's 4 or 5 different factions and you have to basically your job is to try and keep everyone on side, try and make everyone get along whilst also ingratiating yourselves to the natives of the island that you go to. Of course, you can go either way. You can sort of favour one faction over another. You can be hateful to everyone. You can just completely decimate the natives if you want. You know, there's a lot of options out there.
Is there a sort of morality system implemented, or is it mostly just sort of allegiances between the factions?
It's more just allegiances between the factions. You don't get like negative points like you would in Mass Effect, for example, for the Renegade and Paragon system. It's more, this faction is now friendly with you because you did this, or no, you've lost -6 influence with this faction because you did this. And of course, you do get companions as well, and your actions will impact their influence on you as well.
Are they allied to the different factions, or are they just more kind of, they'll just have a certain opinion on the way you do things, similar to Fallout companions.
So it's both, but it's mainly allied to the factions. So you get a native that comes with you. You get one of the factions is very religious. They're quite zealoty.
Okay.
Well, some of them are the extreme ones anyway. So you get a sort of priest type, I guess. It's not quite as cut and dry as that, but that sort of thing.
Battle monk.
Well, yeah, because basically the factions are, there's, in very, very simple terms, you've got sailors, they're called the Naughts, and they're the ones that just carry you everywhere. So you get one of them. You've got the natives, who are sort of tribally, very much in tune with the earth and nature and all that stuff, and they worship a god on the island, which is a major part of the storyline.
I wonder if that's where our shaman bro came from.
Maybe.
Could well be.
Yeah, so you got the natives, then you get the religious-y types, like I said, then obviously in contrast to that as the science lovers.
Yeah, right.
So you get one of those. And then the final one is the coin guard, they're called, which is just like guards, bounty hunters, mercenaries for hire, that sort of deal. Your first companion, in fact, is a guard from the coin guards because he's sort of looked after you and your cousin whilst you were growing up. He was like your bodyguard.
Right, okay.
So yeah, and then you go to the island. Your cousin, who I just mentioned there, is the leader of the new settlement that you found, and a bunch of shenanigans go on from there. People want power, get maddened by the power, and some stuff goes down, and a whole bunch of fights and intrigue and cool storytelling later. You get to the end of the game. So yeah, it's been good fun, man. The combat system's pretty good.
I was just about to ask. It's one thing that we haven't talked about yet. Is kind of what does the gameplay consist of?
It's sort of standard fare open world combat, not quite hack and slash, although there isn't stamina on your swings, so I guess you could call it hack and slash, but it's somewhere between that and a Souls in the sense of you can dodge, you can roll out the way, but I think you have to unlock it. It's not native. I think you have to unlock the perks for it, and then you get that. Otherwise, you just have a quick step. But yeah, it's real time, but you do have a combat pause, so you can take items and stuff in the middle, or you can use a certain ability, a certain spell, or whatever. Very satisfying. I guess the nearest thing is probably The Witcher.
Right. Would you say they're quite comparable games?
No.
Or
Same sort of ballpark. They're both RPGs, right? But they're very different in terms of scale, budget.
How long did it take you to complete this then?
I don't know off the top of my head. In total, 40 hours, 40, something like that. Just over.
All right. Decent length to a game then as well. That's pretty good.
And that was with everything, including the relatively new DLC that came out for it. It only came out June last year, I think, and the game itself came out, I want to say 2019.
Right.
So a little bit of time waiting for that. It might have been a bit later than 2019, actually. I really don't remember when it came out. Got that done, I'm pleased to say. Actually beat the final boss twice because 2 achievements had to be done. That's just what I do. 1 game off the list already, another 24 to go or whatever.
Is that the actual count?
Well, it's actually now 25, I think, because the other game that I've played this week was a frivolous purchase once more, but damn it was £10 off, so I thought, it, may as well.
What'd you get?
I bought myself God of War on the PC.
Ah, nice, man. Oh, I'm excited for you to pick this up and give this a play. This is, a big favourite of mine coming from, I think it was 2018, the year it was released, 2018. Yeah. So enjoy, man. You're going to have a blast with this. What are your first impressions?
Well, I'm about 4 hours in.
Oh, okay. You've made a bit more progress than I thought you might.
Yeah, well, what you failed to mention to me is that I wouldn't be able to put it down.
So yeah, it's a side effect of playing that game. It is pretty amazing, and as I say, just envious of your first time experience of this.
Yeah, no, so it's so far so good. I mean, obviously I haven't got too far. I've just met the first dwarf. He upgraded my axe a little bit, and then I've cracked on a little bit from there. I can't remember exactly how far, but yeah, so far so good. A lot of puzzles, which I wasn't expecting to be quite so many.
Yeah, it's kind of a staple of the franchise, really. Is a mix of combat and puzzles.
Well, I never played any of the original 3, so
it's not something that advertises or comes up, particularly heavily when people talk about the game.
The dynamic between him and Boy is pretty cool. Atreus. But Boy. Oh no, that's what I've just done. That's what I've just done. I've just met the witch.
Ah,
we saved a pig.
Okay, right.
Or a boar, but it's actually a human or something. I don't know.
You say you shot the pig and then
saved it.
She was like, "Oh, don't shoot the pig!" And then
I can't believe you've done this.
And then she kind of saved the pig.
But no, so very good so far. As I say, there are a lot of puzzles, but they're not annoying. They're sort of quite nice. It's find runes, destroy runes, work out where you've got to freeze things to make door A open, and there's some cool things going on. The combat seems really good. I haven't got too into it yet, but the parry system's lovely. The dodging is lovely too.
Adding a quick step, as well as the role that's always been in the games, was a really, really nice choice by the team. And when you get the timing of that quick step down just right, there's very little that can hit you, even with that. Rolling is kind of optional. The quick step seems to be the best thing for most situations.
Yeah, I agree. The role is more to like get out of the way of an AoE.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't go into it too much more detail than I have because it's new, it's exciting. I don't want to know anything, but yeah, I'm going to enjoy playing that over the next however many hours that will be, because I imagine it's going to be a very big game.
Absolutely, have fun, buddy. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about it as the weeks go by.
Yeah. How about you, man? Apart from the challenge, what have you been up to?
Well, so other than sinking quite a few hours into Remnant this week, I also dabbled just a tiny bit more with the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 campaign. So at risk of making this sound a little bit too much like a news item, I might as well very quickly announce that today, being the 28th of October, Call of Duty multiplayer released today. If you were to pre-order the game, you were allowed to sort of access the campaign a week early, which is something we talked a little bit about last week, and I had a chance to get some sort of very initial impressions there. I've been able to play it a little bit more since then, and I've got to say I've been having quite a good time over the last couple of days, sort of putting a little bit of time into that. I actually started the game again because I just felt that, as we talked a little bit about last week, I wasn't really in the right state of mind to take anything in. I was pretty tired and fed up with the fact that it had taken so long to get into, which is still a problem, I'm going to say. I got to say, today when I booted it, I had to restart the game 3 times today before it would let me play the game. One was due to something to do with my Activision account. One thing was to do with some sort of update that it required to do. And the other thing was, again, some sort of Activision error sort of thing that made me need to reset again. And it was something to do with the UI or something. So 3 times today I had to reset it. And then you have to sit there and you have to wait for it to connect to servers and you have to wait for it to render the shaders.
Nice to see that the Call of Duty money is being put to good use as always. It's fucking bullshit, man. Like, Warzone's still broken and that game's been out for fucking ages.
Well, forget Warzone, man. Warzone 2.0 is on the way. But, so that said, I don't want to focus too much on the online or Call of Duty aspect of things because I'm planning on spending a bit of time tonight playing that. Ooh. So very much looking forward to playing that tonight. However, so earlier today and yesterday, I was playing a little bit of Modern Warfare 2 campaign. I've been enjoying myself. We moved on a little bit from working our way through Amsterdam. I finally managed to get my shit together and abduct a terrorist suspect or some sort of drug cartel suspect and get him under the leash and sort of abduct him from the street using spy shit. That was kind of cool.
When you say spy shit, what do you mean by spy shit?
So I had some sort of tube thing that essentially had a tranquilizer in it, and I had to like go around sort of knocking people out.
Now that sounds like the Shaman right there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I needed to. They gave me like a decoy grenade that I needed to chuck into a dumpster to lure some guys down an alleyway to knock them out, and then we ended up sort of abducting someone on the street. But by that point, you've caused a bit of a ruckus, so some more guys run in. So once you've abducted the guy, you take him away, load him into a car, and escape. The next mission, then you follow up. You're trying to kind of capture a terrorist who is essentially kind of taken the place of someone else that was taken out by your special forces guys. At the very beginning of the game, you're kind of seeing some sort of arms deal go down and you blow up a dude, and then the game follows on from the aftermath of that action where he has a successor, he's rallying the people again and causing more global problems. The next mission following the Amsterdam Street mission, where you have to do the spy stuff and abduct someone, you follow a person who is working for some sort of Mexican task group patrolling the US border and is looking for this terrorist that has succeeded the guy that you killed at the start of the game. And you kind of go on a hunt for him, you infiltrate a few buildings, and then eventually you team up with some other guys and just keep on the hunt. Long story short, you still don't capture him. Shortly after, you do a follow-up mission where you're kind of flying an AC-130 or something very similar to that, at least some air support.
Is an AC-130 a bomber plane then or something?
Yeah, pretty much, just like a really high altitude bomber / heavy cannon. So one thing I will say though is, I just described that moment. That's been the kind of only real memorable set piece that I think so far. A lot of this stuff has been quite a different feel to perhaps some of the more bombastic stuff that was happening in Modern Warfare 2.
Is this not Modern Warfare 2 or am I getting confused?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. I should have clarified. I meant the original Modern Warfare 2.
Right. This all confuses me because I'd never played that many COD games, so I don't get it. I know there's so how many? There's Modern Warfare original, 2 original. Is there a 3 original?
1, 2. There's
And
a
then
3
there's
original.
the Modern
Yeah.
Warfare remake that came out 2 years ago. Well, not a remake,
About
but
that, 2 or
it's
3.
Modern Warfare again. And then this is Modern Warfare 2 again.
Again,
Right, cool.
yeah.
I'm with you now.
Yeah. So, unlike its predecessor, which I got to say is a little bit of a surprise, there aren't all that many set pieces and sort of cool action moments that I've seen so far. I should caveat that with saying that I think I'm only on about the 5th or 6th mission, so, I'm not sure what the total amount of missions in the game are. I've been having a good time with it. The missions do present some interesting situations, lots of civilian situations where you have to kind of hold your fire a little bit. That said, there also are the kind of the guns free style missions as well. But anyway, I had a fun time, with my sort of limited experience and time playing this game this week. Obviously, with the challenge being the priority. But yes, I'm very much looking forward to getting into the multiplayer a bit later on tonight.
No, I hope it's good, man, because multiplayer's, that's what COD's bread and butter is, right? So you'd hope that is at least on point. Then we look forward to seeing Warzone 2 when that comes out, and we'll see what happens. I'll probably end up jumping into that for a little bit, but Battle Royale is not my thing, as we've already sort of agreed, so... Not agreed, as we've already established, so I'm sure I'll get peer pressured into it though. Shout outs to George and Charlie.
I'll be nudging you as well. I think after I've had a bit of time with getting some hands on the actual multiplayer, it won't be long before I want to take my loadouts into Warzone and see how they fare against everyone else.
Bit more of that flaming shotgun fart gas build, or
damn straight. I love my toxic builds, which is just mostly comprised of fart gas, molotovs, riot shields, and shotguns with dragon's breath.
Hell yeah!
Also, my my favorite feature about Modern Warfare, and I will be so upset if this doesn't remain a thing, is that when you kill someone, if they've got a microphone plugged into whatever system they're using, you get like 2 or 3 seconds of audio feed the second after you kill them. So yeah, I'll be so gutted if they've got rid of that, because I just love used to hearing someone absolutely lose their shit, smash their keyboard, or just freak out. It's good shit. So that's about me for the games catch up as well. Had a good time playing Modern Warfare, and looking forward to playing a little bit more of that when I've got a little bit more time free.
Look forward to hearing how you're getting on, mate.
Thanks, man. With all that said, shall we break on with the gaming news?
No, that's it. It's done.
Right, well,
news.
Okay, podcast over. What have we learned today, James? I've learned that you're a dick. No sympathy, no empathy about my goddamn possession. So, this week in the gaming news, according to IGN and various other media news outlets, CD Projekt Red announces The Witcher 1 remake. The company has announced that it will remake The Witcher in the Unreal 5 engine, alongside developer Fool's Theory. Fool's Theory, they're also currently supporting Larian Studios in making Baldur's Gate 3, which is currently in early access on Steam, and they also contributed to Ninja Theory's Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, as well as People Can Fly's Outriders.
Good games.
Yeah, good games. Games that I haven't checked out myself, admittedly, but I do hear good things.
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is fun.
Yeah, it's one that I've been meaning. It's a Xbox exclusive, right? And it's been on Games Pass for quite some time.
That's how I played it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how a lot of people played it. So they're a Polish studio describing themselves as a team of veterans, and this will be a true remake, with CD Projekt Red saying that it will be rebuilt from the ground up in the Unreal Engine 5 and is in the early stages of development. So watch this space. It's definitely going to be a while till we see anything tangible from this.
Yeah, so look forward to covering this story again in 2028 when it releases.
How are you feeling, James? I bet you're excited for this news.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this, man. When we discussed the projects that CD Projekt Red had going on 2-3 episodes ago now, I guess it was, I didn't think that Canis Majoris, the big dog, would be The Witcher 1.
Yeah, agreed. I was pretty sure that was going to be The Witcher 4, but
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but you could have put me in a room for hours, days, months, years. I would never have picked a Witcher 1 remake.
Yeah,
so
I think you're right. Yeah.
So the first thing that I will say about this is I'm very glad that it's a remake and not a remaster, because as we've discussed in previous weeks, remastering games, although admittedly this one's from 2008, so at least it's had a bit more time under it, but it's just cashing in nostalgia and things like that. And now, while you could argue that a remake is too, if you look at the state this game was in when it came out compared to what it's surely going to look like in the Unreal 5 engine, it's night and day. I mean, it is going to be completely different in terms of visually, probably gameplay wise too.
They would have to be. There's no way that they're replicating that same combat system into a modern day Witcher title and getting away with it.
No. Particularly after The Witcher 3.
Honestly, I would have no problem dealing with graphics being comparable to the original, but the combat system and everything else to be much more in line with the later titles. Like, I mean, I'm not asking for that. Let me make that clear. But I would have an easier time accepting that than if they basically just made The Witcher 1 look really pretty, but maintained everything else.
No, I mean, it's got to be comparable to The Witcher 3.
Yeah,
if not better.
I imagine it would be.
It's got to be. I mean, there's CDPR's baby. There's The Witcher, that franchise. I don't think they're going to cut any corners with this. I think that it'll be a thorough job. I think it'll be good, particularly after the disastrous launch of Cyberpunk 2077. I think they will be looking to make this one a complete home run.
We're sorry.
And I have faith in them to do it, in all honesty. Looking forward to this. It is going to be a while, though, as you say, but can't wait to see the screenshots when they come out. Can't wait to see a cheeky little trailer in a few years' time, whatever. It's exciting times, man. Do we know how long they've been working on it?
Not to my knowledge, no. This is just sort of a very recent announcement.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I'm conscious that they did mention that it was in early development, which suggests that they haven't been working on it for all that long in terms of the grand scheme of things and what they will eventually end up with. So this is very much a watch this space and see what happens sort of thing.
Yeah, so 2028 that I said earlier, probably, I was joking, but it's probably not that inaccurate.
Yeah, I reckon we might see this perhaps around 2025, 2026, potentially even the year that the next Elder Scroll game is kind of pitched to come out, which would be very interesting to be a year of an Elder Scrolls game and a Witcher game. That would be quite a treat, wouldn't it?
It would, but it would cause quite the quandary.
It would, yeah, in terms of what Game of the Year selections and things like
that.
No,
in terms of which one I play first.
Oh, right, yes. Oh, yeah, if they were released, like, same day, what do you reckon? Which one would you go for?
Elder Scrolls 6, 100%, but it would be a tough choice. It's a tough choice. I made it sound very easy, but it would be tough.
Yeah.
But it would be Elder Scrolls 6, because the Elder Scrolls is my favourite game franchise, so...
Yeah.
The Witcher's in the top 5, but...
I mean, frankly, you'd be contradicting yourself if you didn't play Elder Scrolls first, unless you were very much a kind of save the best for last type guy.
Yeah. But no, so I'm very hyped indeed. Going to try and go into it with the sort of mindset of be patient, be calm, don't overexcite yourself because you never know, but I'm quite hyped for this. The Witcher 1 is a game I do fancy playing, even though for the reasons we've already outlined, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But this is great because it means that I will get a chance to experience that story with a modern day setting in terms of quality of life, good combat, as you say, and hopefully looking incredibly beautiful in that Unreal 5 engine. So yep, looking forward to it, man.
So next up in the news, an article I read today from Polygon, Callisto Protocol, which is a sort of sci-fi themed Dead Space inspired, it appears, horror shooter game, has actually been banned in Japan already before release, likely due to the supposed levels of violence in the game.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah. So
I didn't think Japan were too hot on that sort of thing. If you said Australia, I'd be like, yeah, this isn't news. But Japan? I'm surprised.
Yeah, well, so the company, the organization that is known for making these ratings is known as Cero, CERO. They're known for taking quite a strict line already on the levels of gore that they allow in Japanese video games. Just to give you some examples, dismemberment is a particular taboo. And so, the 2020 Last of Us Part 2 title, they actually had dismemberment removed from the Japanese release, as well as the sex scene edited to obtain its sort of most mature rating, which is the Z rating. Also, another example of Zero censoring a title is Resident Evil 2 Remake. I'm conscious that game was quite heavily censored in Japan as well. There were sort of various scenes where someone gets cut in half and their entrails kind of come out, and
nice.
they cut all that as well. They cut any sorts of scenes where Mr. X like grabs a person's head and just crushes it in his hand. They got rid of all of that stuff.
I've got to say, I'm surprised to hear this from Japan a little bit.
Well, yeah, apparently it's a thing. It must be more of a thing over here because, the censors in Europe, England and America don't seem to have any problem with what's going down in Callisto Protocol.
No.
So, in a translation posted to Reddit and then verified by Eurogamer, the post reads, "The Callisto Protocol has decided to stop the release of the Japanese version. As of now, the Zero rating cannot be passed. we have decided that we would no longer be able to provide you with the experience you need.
From what I've seen of the game, I can believe that, to be honest with you.
The quote continues, "We hope everyone in Japan will understand. If you have already pre-ordered, we will refund you." Although Striking Distance didn't comment on the reasons that Callisto Protocol failed to obtain a rating, they very likely relate to the game's extremely violent content. So Callisto Protocol is a narrative-driven, third-person survival horror game set roughly 300 years in the future, where the players will take on the role of Jacob Lee, a victim of fate thrown into Black Iron Prison, a maximum security penitentiary located on Jupiter's moon Callisto.
I like the idea that it's 300 years in the future and they're still building prisons out of black iron. It's like, surely you've got some cooler shit like titanium or tungsten or some shit that's harder to get out of, right?
It might just be the name. I mean, there's still a lot of questions I have about this game. For instance, just how close this does compare to Dead Space. I had a look at some gameplay footage, and I got to say that the combat looks like slightly comparable, although there does seem to be more of a melee-based element. It appears that quite early on in the game, you get a security baton that no doubt you pick up from one of the guards of this prison, and you actually use quite a lot of melee moves, and apparently even the baton has a skill tree. Some of the other aspects that really kind of screamed Dead Space to me were what looked like to be a health bar that's on the back of your character, as opposed to being represented on the UI, on the actual screen. Gun, ammo, capacities and things like that, again, were represented on the guns themselves, and even, kind of like the ammo display looked quite similar to Dead Space as well.
And do we know if it has a HUD aside from that?
It's very hard to tell, because obviously a lot of this stuff that we're seeing is preview footage and not like strictly gameplay footage. So there, if a HUD is there, they would have likely removed it anyway for the kind of presentation purposes.
Makes sense,
so I don't really have a clear picture of that yet. What I would say as well is that you can also get a very strong sense that this prison is being absolutely ravaged by some sort of unknown alien force that is corrupting people and taking them over, very much like the Ishimura was in Dead Space as well. It's kind of like a colony of pre-existing people that has been very quickly overcome by some sort of evil power, and it's transforming people and turning them into monsters that you need to escape.
Ah, the Flood.
Yeah. Kinda, yeah. It looks like the character that you play, Jacob Lee, is actually a prisoner to begin with. I've seen him walking around in some prison clothing.
Makes sense.
And I assume at some point it just all goes to shit and you escape your cell and fight your way out. I mean, that's, I'm down for this. I've heard that they have a special Callisto gore system, which I assume is just kind of lots of good chunk physics. You shoot an enemy and chunks fly out of it. One thing that I did see as part of the gameplay footage, when it appears that certain enemies, you shoot them, you can dismember parts and knock parts off, but there's actually another monster underneath it. So instead of transforming as you knock something off, you might actually like unleash the inner monster sort of thing, and it will not just transform but become something else entirely through kind of you doing damage to it. I don't have a clear view of what this actually is, but I was seeing someone shoot something, and then in front of him it almost looked like another monster burst out of it.
Okay.
So it looks pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like kind of taking the Dead Space dismemberment, doing something a little different and a little bit extra steps. I'm here for it. It looks cool.
I was going to say, I'm certainly intrigued by that. That sounds really interesting. So it's like if you cut their legs off, then they could get leg monster comes out, and I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of still up for discovery.
Interesting.
But, it even has powers such as an ability where you can sort of pick stuff up with your mind and then chuck it. Again, very much like Dead Space. It's kind of the same power. So it'll be interesting to see. It does have a cooldown. I don't think it relies on you kind of collecting items to replenish it. It does seem to just have a cooldown instead, and there does seem to be lots of opportunities for picking up aliens and then doing things like chucking them into moving ship parts, for instance, and
nice,
and kind of mashing them together in all sorts of different violent ways. So yeah.
Are we sure this isn't just the Dead Space remake?
Well, it's made by Striking Distance Studios, who I don't believe have any ties to the Dead Space franchise.
But you're not ruling it out. You
But
just
I
don't
didn't
believe.
say no.
You just don't believe.
I also think that, this is a type of game where if I was to scrub off the logo and say, hey, James, new Dead Space game, you'd be like, no questions.
Yeah, cool.
So, on with the next article, which I read from PC Gamer. So, to add to the Overwatch 2 controversy, a third-party creator has made a custom server that when you enter it, it forces one player to play as female player Cassidy against a team of Overwatch heroes. In the top left of the screen, it instructs you to flash to knock down your victims, which refers to Cassidy's old Overwatch 1 flashbang ability, and then says to teabag to which is written with spaces, which is, I assume, to get around the word filtering of the game. As you crouch and teabag your opponent, the words appear at the top of the screen, at which point enemy heroes are then marked as pregnant, and eventually a Torbjorn bot is spawned in to simulate a child accompanying them. So, you know,
It's pretty fucked up.
yeah, pretty fucked up. Don't really know much more else to say about this than extremely messed up. This goes a little bit beyond the intended scope of something like this. Halo's Forge mode definitely didn't have a sexual harassment simulator. This is kind of a turnout for the books, I think, in terms of new lows for games, especially particularly games that are free to play, and therefore a lot of kids are going to be playing this.
Like, me, honestly.
It's terrible. And, you know, it goes with this article. I've already read articles where it's parents writing in and warning other parents about this, saying, for the time being, don't let your kids play this. My son discovered this.
Yeah, I saw that same article, I think, yeah.
So, you know, quite shocking stuff. And it's pretty surprising that a term like hasn't been flagged up, you know, in their censors or anything like that.
But teabag did.
Picked up? Teabag to yeah, that one also slipped by.
I mean, it's honestly insane to me. You know, this is Activision Blizzard, right?
Well, so I have heard some speculation that this was almost made in a sort of like ironic highlight of the sexual harassment allegations that are currently underway and proceeding at Activision Blizzard. I gotta say, it could be. I'm leaning on this is just internet perverts. I feel like you can come up with any reasons. It's probably internet perverts. You can come up with any reason you want.
It sounds to me like someone's trying to pay it off as a noble cause here, and it's like, I'm sorry, no, there's nothing noble about that. Even in like the most satirical way possible, leave this shit alone, honestly. Like,
yes,
especially as the points you've raised, it's a free-to-play game. It's essentially aimed for young kids as well as adults. You know, it's quite a cartoony aesthetic, the game. It's got a fucking talking gorilla, I think. Don't know if he made it to number 2, but he's in number 1.
Yeah, he's around.
It's not the most adult game in the world ever, but it's still an adult game, right? But to have shit like this it's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's not that kind of adult game.
No, it's
not at all.
It's not. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened, obviously. I mean, Roblox famously or infamously has had similar sort of things because you can create your own
loads of
worlds.
inappropriate content on that.
But with the best will in the world to Roblox, it's a slightly different kettle of fish to Overwatch 2 in terms of publicity, size of studio, probably player base. I know a lot of people play Roblox, but let's be real.
Oh no, I would think that the Roblox player base dwarfs Overwatch 2.
What, dwarfs it?
Yeah.
Well, you think the
Yes.
You think the Roblox player base is bigger?
Much bigger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, kids fucking love Roblox. That's what makes it, you know, more worrying is that, yes, this is disturbing, right? But I reckon there's way worse stuff going on in Roblox sort of thing. I think this is just kind of, this is coming more to light because it's Overwatch 2. So publicity-wise, you're right. Player base-wise, I don't know. I reckon Roblox has a much larger base than Overwatch
You're
2.
probably right. I just assumed Overwatch was because of the esports. Although I could believe that it has more players than Overwatch in general, to be honest. But
I mean,
who knows?
Kids often dictate the market, right? Like kids are the vast majority of players, I would imagine. So yeah, why not?
Yeah. With things we've learned today, it's a little early, but Overwatch is a place for kids and perverts.
Kids and perverts and perverted kids.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's Ty Bond. That's f***ed up, mate. And hopefully the Activision Blizzard will actually be able to put better checks in place. I mean, like you say, the fact that the word has gone through the censor there, it's pretty mad.
Yeah, unbelievable. I think this is definitely getting enough public attention that they're going to absolutely need to address this and fix this as soon as possible, and hopefully prevent any sort of further attempts to create sort of content that could be considered completely offensive or inappropriate for any audience, let alone, you know, a child audience as well. Because I think, you know, at the end of the day, it does appear that from the description of this, the aim of the game is to rape someone and impregnate yourself. You know, it's a terrible concept for a game, and it's kind of making light of sexual harassment and people, and I do somehow doubt that this is not to be a sort of a swipe at Activision Blizzard for their ongoing allegations. I think that this is just someone jerking it to Overwatch. On to the last article of the day from The Gamer. So this short and sweet article, the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Physical Edition disc only contains roughly 70 megabytes of data. So just for reference, for people who aren't familiar with file sizes, the original game was around 40 to 50 gigabytes, which is roughly 650 times bigger than the content that is included on the new disc. So the content within this is basically, you know, as you could probably gather, it's not the actual data for the game. You know, we're probably looking at like an over 100 gig game title
comfortably, and the rest. That would
yeah, I mean, if not in the sort of like near to 100s, which will comfortably be 150 gigs by the time they're done with updating it, sort of thing. Total file size after a few updates. So 70 megabytes really is basically just, it's like a dummy disc that's basically a key to connect you to a digital download. So you stick the disc in, the console goes, oh, okay, time to download the other 100 gigs of this game, sort of thing, because there's nothing on here. So it really does fulfill the same purpose as literally if they'd have just stuck a cardboard disc in the case with a CD code on the back of it that you just typed it in and redeemed the code on whichever store you use. Steam, Xbox, PlayStation. Very odd choice. I get the feeling that this choice might have been motivated by criticism that some titles have got, like, for instance, Horizon Forbidden West. When that was released, the physical collector's edition came with a case. It had a CD slot in it. It did not have a CD. They did not put a CD in the physical edition copy.
Then where's the physical edition?
It came with all the sort of the collector's edition standard fare. And it came with empty CD.
So an empty CD case. I've got my Aloy statue. I've got my canvas bag. I've got my branded bottle. Yeah.
Bit of artwork, maybe.
And what's like a thing
couple
from
postcards. Who the sends postcards of video games? But anyway.
What's like a weapon from the game? You'd get like a relatively life-size version of that made out of plastic.
Some sort of
a spear.
Maybe.
I don't know.
A little unique armor set for Aloy, a little code for the game.
And an empty CD case. Like, what the fuck is the point in that?
They didn't even stretch for the kind of the blank CD cases, so it was just like a blank. It actually had the slot for the disc in it.
The worst. And so you open it, empty disc, and then on the booklet side, there's the bit of cardboard that has a CD.
Q, here's a CD code.
Oh, wow. That's not a physical edition, then, is it?
It's hardly a physical edition, is it?
That's an empty case.
It got a lot of flack for that, as you can imagine. But I think probably the team heard about things like that and they decided, it, we'll give them a useless bit of plastic. They want the useless bit of plastic. Here's the useless little bit of plastic, you're and you get 70 megabytes of data. So there's all sorts of arguments for this being shitty practice. This is entirely pointless. What are your takes on this, James?
Well, my take is I feel sorry for those that like to have physical collections. I don't do it personally myself anymore, but I respect it. I used to. I do it with some CDs for certain bands still. Shout out to In Flames. It's just pointless, like you say. I mean, you're paying £1 a megabyte, probably.
yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah. Okay, man, I think that's all us wrapped up for the news today. It's time to move on to the long-awaited A Games Challenge!
So Will, talk to me. Remnant from the Ashes. How'd you get on, man? Did you enjoy it?
Well, man, I'll start off by saying it was my absolute pleasure to play this title this week. I had a blast, and as you know, this is a game that wasn't new to me. This is a game that me and you have played together for quite a good few hours with a different character. We've progressed quite far into the game, had a good time then. So I was looking forward to getting back into this because it had been some time since we'd played it together, even longer since I played it on my own. And I got to say, I had an absolute blast. I started off this game on normal difficulty and started it off solo over the weekend following the recording session. Played for sort of the first few bosses on my own, and what I will say is that I guess my initial reactions to this game I'll take you back, if you will, to a time when I had never played Remnant before. And my first impressions of the game then were that it was slightly uninspired. I felt like perhaps the enemy variation left something to be desired. The color palette was quite samey, basic, brown and
That's
grey,
a very fair
sort of
comment
thing.
for the
A
first
lot of
2
going
worlds,
around. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is very true for the first sort of chunk of the game.
Maybe not so much the enemy variety, but certainly the color palette for sure.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of those sort of opinions came before we'd actually gotten to areas that offered offered more enemy variation, because, you know, absolutely I would agree now that there is variation to the enemy designs, although a lot of the types fight exactly the same. There's quite a bit of variation in the sort of the tougher, larger enemies, not quite bosses, but mini bosses. I will say that the controls in this game work really well. They do take a tiny bit of getting used to, some slight sort of, you know, choices that aren't quite familiar. They seem to have blended a classic third-person shooter type control layout with a first-person shooter control type layout, which kind of took us ever so slight bit of getting used to. But once I was in there, I was having an absolute blast with it. I was running around, sprinting, sliding, dodging, switching weapons, switching the shoulder that you fire from to look around corners easier and stuff like that. And it works very, very well together. There seem to be quite a few various weapons, although we did spend quite a bit of time, and I suppose at this point I should say that although I did start this game off on my own, I did actually play a very, very large chunk of it with James here.
That's me.
That is you. Yes, we kind of linked up on this one and continued through the game together. The weapon variation, a lot of the things have a pretty decent impact. I started off with a pretty standard repeater pistol and kept that for, I think, the majority of the playthrough.
The entire playthrough.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, because it had pretty good range, pretty good, you know, fires as fast as you can pull the trigger. So
it's not a Jacobs, but
if it took more than one shot, hell, you weren't using a Jacobs.
It'll do. It's not far off, I'll tell you that much. And then the other weapon I used in the game, for the most part, was the coach gun, which is the kind of almost the default weapon. It is the default weapon that you get as the cultist character class.
Although you did upgrade to quite a fun weapon at the end there, didn't you?
That's right, yeah. So I ended up unlocking some sort of beam laser gun thing. I can't remember. Was it called the charge rifle or something like that? The beam rifle, right, yeah. Yeah, it just essentially shoots like a bright yellow beam of
radiation, I think.
Blast. It affects enemies with radiation.
And me, if you happen to hit me as well.
And it's kind of, it makes friendly fire very obvious because there's no enemy projectile that even closely resembles it.
Interestingly, you can't friendly fire with the melee though. Go figure.
No, you can't, which is probably for the best.
Yes,
I imagine,
definitely for the best.
And we'll come on to this a little bit, but the melee is a little bit scrappy. A lot of the time I found myself kind of overreaching with the melee. It does blend shooting and melee quite seamlessly, but I found that even though it's the sort of game that you wouldn't necessarily want to lock on with because the focus is absolutely on the shooting over the melee, it would have been useful for certain encounters just because of the way that your character animation works. If you have an enemy coming towards you and you press attack at the wrong time, you'll often kind of go right past them as they go over your shoulder trying to attack you, sort of thing. And then it does lead to quite scrappy situations where you're kind of mashing the melee button hoping to hit them.
I agree with you entirely about the melee system. It's not bad, but I think it could have been absolutely revolutionized by the simple addition of either a block or a parry or both. I think that would have made all the difference.
I agreed. It just needs a tiny bit more depth. And if there were to be a Remnant 2, I would really hope that they sort of worked on the melee a little bit, because there's very little else that I have to complain about this game. In terms of that, I think that everything else is pretty damn solid. A lot of my concerns about enemy variation and variation to the environments were addressed as I played more of the game. We came to sort of towards the end of the game a very nice kind of forested area, which was a real nice breath of fresh air from the kind of the abandoned cities, and there's a desert, wasn't there? There was a swampy area. Yeah, so having a nice lush forest was a welcome change. And I suppose in a way that was kind of a bit of a signal that we were coming to the end of the game, a bit of a forewarning there, just given that it was suddenly a very changing environment, which kind of reminded me slightly of as I was coming to the end of Borderlands 1. Suddenly there was a ton of variation. We got the Crimson Raiders, we got various different alien designs, we got a snowy environment, and we had some lush grassy environments. There's a lot of parallels there between my perception of Borderlands initially and my perception of this initially, is that early days of the game, there wasn't enough variation in it for my liking initially, and that led me to think that the rest of the game was going to lack a lot of variety. However, with both titles, those sort of fears were put aside the more I played it.
Although I think that Remnant does a slightly better job at giving you more variety sooner than Borderlands does. Love Borderlands 1 to bits, but let's be real, you spend a lot of time in those sandy, deserty areas rather than anywhere else.
There's a lot of time you spent killing skags.
Or basic psychos and marauders. You're just like, really?
Yeah.
It gets better in the later Borderlands titles with the nomads and things like that, but Borderlands 1.
Definitely. I think that was something they took on board
Yeah.
for the later ones, is like, we need to vary this up sooner rather than later, because people are getting the wrong idea
Yeah.
about this game, you know, especially seeing as, you know, the cover aesthetic is just deserts and skags and
Yeah, exactly.
psychos sort of thing. So yes. Back to Remnant. So one thing I will say is I found the storyline a little difficult to follow in this. I didn't find it the most coherent. Admittedly, I was not skipping entirely lines of dialogue, but I was hurrying along the dialogue, let's say. I didn't want, you know, I probably wasn't giving the voice actors their fair dues. I was kind of just mashing through. And I think now's a pretty good time, James, to quickly drop in that I fucking passed the challenge this week. As you well know, you were there. No surprises for you.
I
helped me
also
beat
finished the challenge this
but,
week.
you know, yeah, absolutely.
Another one off the list mentioned earlier. Just saying.
Yeah. And had a great time doing it
Very
too.
good fun.
To move on to some of the things that I perhaps perceived slightly more negatively about the game, as well as the combat, was just how quickly it all came to an end. You mentioned that Borderlands, you know, did sort of vary things up slightly later than Remnant. I'd be interested to see just how that tallies up, because I feel like Remnant took me less time to complete, and I was honestly surprised to see that my total playtime on that was about 30 hours, although I think we both did say that a lot of that was probably idling. I'm a very restless gamer. I often, like, you know, I'll play for like 20 minutes and then get up and wander around for a little bit, do some shit, and then come back. So the time spent playing the game on Steam is often not quite representative of how long I've spent actively.
Will hasn't played Elden Ring for 498 hours.
No, probably just 400 or something.
But no, absolutely, that's absolutely true. And it's another interesting thing about Remnant is I joined Will's session, and because I joined Will's session, my character's time didn't get increased at all. So I've got like end game level stats, end game level stuff, but my file still says, yeah, you've only played that for 7 hours. Good times.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the class that you played as?
So I can't actually remember what class I started as, because the character I used was actually one I started in August 2021. It turns out.
Oh right, okay, fair time ago.
So I think I picked the hunter because I like to start with the hunting rifle, because it's, in my opinion, the best gun in the game. Although the beam rifle, I've got to say, that looked really good, really good.
Yeah, that's real fun. Yeah, if you like melting health bars, then the beam rifle's for you.
But my character was sort of a little bit more lightweight. I was wearing the armor that you start the game with, because it gives you a bonus to find 20% more treasures with 2 items, and then 20% more scrap throughout the whole game, which is, and scrap's the currency for the game that you spend things on. So I was just sort of a light long range gunner, but then I had also a magnum pistol for some punch up close and a big old hammer. And actually, interestingly, I spent the first few hours of the game, both in my solo playthrough that got me to this point and in the playthrough with Will, I didn't level up a single trait for ages and ages and ages. So I was there getting 1 or 2 shot by a lot of things early doors.
Yeah, you were kind of taking on the kind of Skyrim stay at level 1 approach there. Don't spend a single perk point.
Yeah, and honestly, knows why. I mean, I can't put myself back in the mindset from August 2021, James, but I think my logic was probably you unlock different traits as you go, and I didn't want to spend my points until I knew what more of the traits were.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that it was probably just being concerned about wasting points in traits that you weren't actually that interested in come the time that you were able to see every single trait that was available to you.
Yeah, and it turns out that was a great move, because some of the traits you get later on are pretty insane in terms of crit chance, crit damage, weak point damage, and all that good stuff.
And that really comes into play, especially with some of the higher fire rate weapons in the game as well. So the laser that I was using, essentially it has a ridiculously high fire rate because it's just almost constantly doing damage. It probably does, I don't know, anywhere between like 4 to 5 hits per second, I would say, giving the numbers that I was seeing bouncing off of things while I was shooting it.
Yeah, that's probably true, yeah.
And because you're getting that many hits per second, and if you're increasing the chance that one of those hits is going to be a critical hit, then it just lights up with critical hits. And then if you're also buffing the damage of a critical hit, as well as the weak spot hits, if you're getting a simultaneous weak spot, critical hit that's also being buffed. It was just outrageous. Some outrageous numbers were popping up.
Oh, exactly. And bear in mind as well, the hunting rifle that I was using is a specialized crit weapon. I had a ring that gave me extra crit damage and also gave me extra damage on enemies that were unaware that I was shooting at them.
That's right, yeah.
So, I mean, as Will said there, some of the numbers you were seeing pop off was insane. I mean, like my hunting rifle's base weapon by endgame, I think was roughly 140, maybe a bit more. I was seeing hits of 850 plus, and that's not including the final boss, which you get some obscene numbers because of the way that fight has to do. I think I saw 800,000.
Yeah.
It was one of the 890,000 or something. It's madness.
Just before we get into the final boss, which I do want to get onto, I just wanted to talk. You mentioned briefly the hammer in the game, which was your weapon of choice.
Until I got the claws at the very end. But the hammers, I actually switched back to the hammer because it was better.
The hammer is the slowest yet heaviest damage weapon in the game, I believe.
Melee weapon, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, melee weapon, yeah. And then you also get an axe, which was my melee weapon I was using initially, which has less reach than the hammer, is significantly faster.
I don't know if it's significantly faster, actually. It's faster for sure, but I don't know if it's significantly faster though.
Because you can also charge the attack and do two very quick hits.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it was. I think that a lot of this stuff is kind of really pretty balanced, though. Some of the other weapons, as you mentioned briefly, there was the Wolverine claws, and then I ended up picking up a sort of like a spear, yeah, more like a glaive, though, right? It was kind of more like a
kinda,
spear
yeah,
that was intended for thrusting and not throwing, sort of thing.
No, you almost it's got the sort of blade on it where you think that you could slice with it as well.
That's right. Yeah,
but it's very much a proddy stick.
Ever so slightly hooked. Ever so slightly,
yeah,
just to kind
ever
of,
so slightly.
And then I guess, well, now we've mentioned that, I think it's also probably good to mention as a slight criticism of this game, I don't think there's a huge variation to the class that you pick in the start. I don't think that really forces you to change gameplay so much.
And considering you can buy all of the armors and starting weapons from all the other classes as soon as you finish the first bit.
Exactly. Not just armor and starting weapons, but also abilities.
Yeah, and their weapon mods.
You would think that typically that would be the one thing that was unique to the class. It's not. You can buy the offensive class for your cultist class sort of thing. You can do whatever you want with it, which is, on one note, very cool. On another note, it basically invalidates any need to do multiple playthroughs of this game unless you just want to start with different armor sets, I guess.
Well, I think it does affect your starting traits.
It does affect your starting traits, but
nothing you can't unlock later.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of starting at, 1 for certain traits, you'll start with 5 for certain traits. But, as we both know, it doesn't take you long to get to +5 with all traits maxing out at 20. So it's really not much of a head start.
Not at all, and it makes no difference anyway. Like 1 or 2 points early game, late game makes no difference.
Yeah. And just while we're on that as well, we're talking about classes there a little bit. This game does have a character creator. You are able to pick a character model. It's very sparse. It's kind of
incredibly basic.
Face, skin tone, hair, voice. That's kind of it, right? And then starter class.
That's basically it. Maybe some facial hair and stuff like that.
That's right, yeah. And then maybe like some face marks, some scars and blemishes and things like that. But yeah, very, very basic. So nothing much to say about there.
Well, are there any other bosses you want to talk about?
Notable bosses. I think that there was some quite cool ones. I did like the large boss that was spinning. We were kind of on a turntable and we were fighting it while we were on that. And then every so often it would grab the level that we were on and spin it round.
The Clavinger, I think it was called.
Yeah, he was particularly cool. I just like the concept of being spun around and being slightly disorientated and having to like find out where the cover had re-emerged so you could avoid his attacks and things like that. And then focus on taking him down. There was a boss that was very reminiscent of the butterfly boss from Dark Souls 1, except there were 2 of them, and you were on a bridge, much the same as you are in Dark Souls, except that this time there's a butterfly on either side of you. Well, it does start off with one, I believe, and then the second one sort of shows up very shortly, and then one sort of proceeds to hyper beam you, while the other one proceeds to sort of just send various smaller projectiles your way that you can shoot out the air when they're traveling towards you, which I thought was a nice touch. But that was tough, wasn't it? We were doing pretty damn good at this game, but we didn't start to really falter until that. And admittedly, a lot of those falterings were me. Admittedly, some of those falterings weren't even necessarily due to the boss. I just got careless and rolled off the bridge a few times. And also I was blown off the bridge by the hyper beam by the bosses as well. So
as was I.
Yeah, it's that was a fairly tough boss fight.
That was comfortably the hardest boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not even close. It was quite insane at times, actually.
But I did enjoy the level of coordination that it forced us to adopt there.
Yeah.
You know, we were kind of very coordinated. We had a game plan after about our third or fourth death, you know, when to stop shooting one boss, when to move on to the other one,
Yeah.
when to be cautious about beams and things like that. So yeah, I think one of the very strong points of this game is the fact that it does allow co-op, and it is very seamless. And we actually did say even yesterday, it's fantastic. You click the game, you click on continue game, within about 10 seconds you're playing. You press one button to go from the main menu straight into your game, and then within a few seconds you were able to join my game, and within a few seconds after you click join you were in, sort of thing. So very, very quick, very seamless, and that's definitely something that shouldn't be underappreciated in this day and age with games.
No,
It's just
not at all.
simplicity of actually getting into the fucking thing and playing it. As I briefly mentioned with Call of Duty, that needs to restart like 3 times before you actually get to play it. So, yes, unfortunately refreshing to play a game that's very easy to get into and play with someone else with minimal faffing about.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very well done, Remnant. Well done.
Well done, Gunfire Games and Perfect World Entertainment. The one thing I will say about bosses in this game in general is the bosses themselves are typically very good, but they did try and add a lot of artificial difficulty in by having the bosses being able to summon endless mobs.
Yes.
And whilst in multiplayer that's not too big an issue, although we did get over on a few times, and if one of us died, then God, it's over.
It's very hard to recover from that because it takes time to revive another player, and usually in that time the enemy has dropped a heavy attack that will knock you out of your revive animation if it hits you. So you often get chained between, you know, if you're really adamant on reviving the person, you're very likely just going to die while you're doing it.
Yeah, or you just get ganked by 8 mobs that have come and spawned in whilst the other person was down.
Gives you very little room to breathe with all of those mobs constantly coming in, and I do agree with you. I think that it did feel a little bit like artificial difficulty there. The bosses would have been a walkover if it weren't for all their mobs.
No, they definitely should have had mobs if they were going to be the difficulty they were. I just wonder whether it needed to be quite as many as it was, particularly, and I know they didn't for the challenge, but we've played this on hard mode as well. We haven't completed it on hard, but we've played it on hard. It's outrageous how many mobs there are in hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's noticeable, the difference, which is crazy to me. But it's more of a problem soloing, though, I find.
Yeah. And as a result, I actually, not only did I prefer the bosses that had less mobs, like the butterfly ones, but I also found it made them much more memorable because I was spending much less time trying to actually fight the boss and learn its moves rather than getting overrun by standard mobs that I've been fighting for the rest of the level.
Yeah, but it's worth noting there are probably only 2 bosses you can really say that about, which is the butterfly and the final boss.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And even then, the final boss does involve mobs to a certain degree, which we'll come on to in a bit.
Yeah.
The other boss that I'd like to mention, I did like, I think he was called like the Defiled or something like that. He was kind of like
Undying,
a butcher.
maybe.
Sorry,
The unclean one.
The unclean one, yeah. I think that he was a cool boss as well. He made me think, because he was so melee based, he really did make me think of Dark Souls, and I actually, for that boss, kind of put away my gun and just sat there meleeing him and dodging. He was kind of ever so slightly reminiscent of the sort of moveset and style as the Asylum Demon, except that he also had a crazy spinning move that went on for like an entire 30
Way
seconds.
too long,
So you just had to like... He kind of cleared the room, I suppose. It was useful for him dealing with his own mobs, which I suppose is one good thing about that, is that other enemies can hurt other enemies by shooting them and blowing up and things like that. That's a nice touch.
He had his ass out as well. His ass was his weak spot.
Yeah, you gotta love a boss where you shoot them in the and that's their weak spot.
Yeah.
What's
Literally between the cracks.
Straight in the cracks. Another boss that we encountered but weren't able to fight was this kind of cool looking wolf dude that seemed very evil. He had a proposition for us. We did turn him down but weren't really presented with much of a choice. And I can only assume that at some point in the game we made a decision that meant that he was no longer on the table for fighting. It may have been that bit where I told that dude who was looking for the heart of a monster to go f*** himself.
Could have been that.
And then we started to fight him, and I wonder if, I don't know, if you went along with that clearly evil guy's plan, that then potentially you may have fought the wolf. Potentially. But that remains to be seen. For whatever reason, anyway, he didn't activate. We had a little conversation with him, then we wandered off.
Yeah. I am going to attempt this solo at some point, so I'll let you know. But...
Yeah, do let me know, yeah. And, I would like to see, because he did look like a cool boss, although he was kind of very shrouded in darkness in the cave, so...
Yeah, didn't look very big.
Didn't look very big, but I reckon he was quite an agile hop-around type boss instead. So, other than those bosses, I did think that, although I will say that I found the ending slightly anticlimactic for the game, I was kind of a bit like, oh, we're here. I mean,
Yeah.
other than the hints, the sudden change of environment, as I said earlier, to the forest, it was very much like, oh, game over, I guess. This is clearly the final boss. When we did fight him, he's got 2 stages, which was quite cool. One of them, he's pretty weak, but he has some very devastating moves that he can do, very devastating range moves that he can do.
Like one-shot range moves if every single one of the hits you.
Yeah, pretty much. If you don't dodge, you're going to die.
And that's with both of us with full health, by the way. This, like, I'd leveled up at this point.
We had our full maximum health, yeah. So once you've managed to whittle down his health and get him down, he kind of transforms into the nightmare phase, which is a phase where essentially it's a human form that appears to have like a kind of a VR headset on it with Doc Octopus style tentacles coming out the back of it. He very much is reminiscent of Doc Ock when he's standing there kind of hoisting himself up with his tentacles. But that's phase 1. Once you've killed him, he kind of gets absorbed into this giant butterfly demon thing.
Well, it's the root in it, so it's kind of he's
roots.
encased in a rib cage of trees, which then sprouts a demon out of it.
That's right, and you know, just for context, since we haven't mentioned it before now, I don't think the root is the main kind of antagonist in the game, right? The root is essentially this energy that is corrupting everything, and you know, standard lazy writer.
Yeah, it eats the cores of planets and destroys all civilization and habitats and all that. Leaves the planets cold and lifeless, and very similar to insert antagonist here. It's like, I'm doing this to purify. Everything will be calm and peaceful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they want to cure the chaos of the world by killing everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think in fact even the final boss, even Spiel, is like,
we bring order, we bring quiet.
Yeah,
like,
that's it. That's exactly the line.
It's
yeah,
like, yeah, jeez.
So, following completing phase 1 of the boss fight, as I mentioned, you enter the nightmare phase. You're now fighting a sort of a giant flying root amalgamation of the Dreamer, who is the person in the VR headset, and the root. It's flying around in the sky, chucking a bunch of projectiles at you, and every so often it kind of sucks you into this alternate reality zone, which is, I assume, what they're going to call the nightmare. And essentially in there, unlike the rest of the boss fight, there's actually mobs in there for you to kill. And what you'll notice is that every time you kill a mob, and believe me, this took us a few times to notice, we noticed that you would kill a mob, you would start to get a number stacking, and every time you killed a mob, you would get another number. And what that would essentially do is buff your character so that when you return from the nightmare, through locating a portal in the darkness and running through it, you end up back in the boss arena proper, back with the boss, except now your character is massively powered up and you're able to do obscene amounts of damage. I think when we were playing towards the end of the game, my base damage was something like 1,000, maybe 500 or something. After killing maybe about 7 or 8 enemies inside the nightmare zone and coming back out, I was getting buffed to like 8,000, 9,000, that sort of thing.
And this is a standard hitting his armored section, so it's not doing much damage, right? As we mentioned briefly earlier, you get in those crit weak spots when you shoot him enough bullets into him and he opens up and reveals the Dreamer again.
It's over 9,000!
800 odd thousand I was seeing 400. I think your beam was doing 450 odd thousand every hit, so 4 of those a second sort of thing. It's like, jeez.
Exactly. And we were thinking at the start, like, this guy has a lot of goddamn health.
Yeah, I thought it was bugged.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. We were doing that little damage that you couldn't even make out that we were doing damage.
Yeah. I was like,
it was only because I was training my eyes on it and actually stopped looking at what I was doing that I was able to ascertain it is going down millimeter by millimeter, you know?
I was literally like, this is ridiculous. We've been doing so much damage to every single boss in the game to this point. Why is this doing nothing? And then we realized
you got to kill the mobs inside the nightmare realm, come back out, deal a load of damage to him so that it then sort of breaks the cage around the weak spot, which is the Dreamer. And then you got to shoot the out of the Dreamer, rinse and repeat that 2 or 3 times, give or take a few more dodging projectiles and going in and out of the nightmare stage. And with that, it was done. We beat the boss, he had his little spiel, and he f***ed off.
One quick thing I will say about the Nightmare Zone that just made it a little bit more interesting, I suppose, is because otherwise, you're probably asking, why didn't you just go in the Nightmare Zone, kill all of the mobs, and then come out and one-shot him? Well, what happens in the Nightmare Zone, Will?
Your health ticks down the whole time you're in there, so you can't remain infinitely in the Nightmare Zone. You have to kind of kill as many enemies as you can in the space of time that your health bar will allow, and then get back out quickly. Because if you spend too long in there, stronger enemies start spawning, you start losing health, as well as just losing health naturally over time. We were kind of circumventing that a little bit by using one of our powers, which actually allowed us to set down a sort of area of effect healing spell, and as we were taking turns doing that, it was pretty much counteracting the health we were losing just while being in the nightmare zone.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was totally counteracting it to the point that if we weren't getting hit, we were for the most part staying at full health.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
And you know what? Just on that point, James, I just remembered something that would be completely amiss if we didn't mention it.
Doggos!
Those doggos saved our lives many a time.
Yeah.
It was one of those things, it was just kind of like a throwaway moment where I saw an NPC, he had a dog with him, obviously. Video game ambitions dictate that you got to go up to the dog and see if you can pet it. And with that, I got given a perk that essentially was called something like man's best friend or best boy or goodest boy or something like that.
A very good boy or something like that, yeah.
A very good boy, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
And that would allow you to modify any one of your guns that didn't have a locked weapon mod, meaning that you could summon in a dog that would stick around for 2 minutes, dealing a decent bit of damage to enemies, and you could also buff the damage that it dealt by 20% for the remainder of its lifetime by walking up to it and petting it.
Yeah.
And once James also had this power, we made mincemeat of some of the bosses, and it was really useful, right? Because not only are they doing damage to the bosses, they're also distracting them a lot.
And also killing a lot of the mobs.
Exactly. They were dual purpose. It was, their AI on them wasn't particularly controllable. You couldn't direct them to do what you wanted them to. But it was they were either doing a combination of clearing out the mobs so that we could focus on the boss, or keeping the boss busy so that we could focus on the mobs. And we kind of just adapted based on what they were doing, really. Because once they were dealing with the mobs, they would tend to stick with the mobs and vice versa. If they were on the boss, that was all they were going to do for the whole boss fight. So
No, exactly.
very useful.
Very handy indeed. Although I must say mine only lasted a minute because I didn't have the cultist armor giving me an extra mod duration. So.
Right. Okay.
But still, plenty long enough. Like, wow.
Yes, and considering that, all of these mod charges and things just recharge over time, it was rare that we were kind of reaching to summon a dog or reaching for that health casting thing. At least one of us didn't have it. I think it was also definitely helped by the fact that we had the same weapon mods for the majority of this game, so that if one of us didn't have one to use to hand, the other one did.
Exactly. And the good thing is you can switch them out on the fly as well. So there was one, might even have been Butterfly Boss. Dogs were useless because they couldn't reach it. So I switched back to my Flaming Bullets mob, which was actually really handy. You can set them on fire, do a little bit of damage over time, Cool mechanic.
And I would guess my final takeaways from this game are boss design, leaves something to be desired. Graphics,
Fair comment.
pretty good. Controls, very good.
Yeah.
Mixture of gameplay, very good. Variation of gameplay, okay, not great. Absolutely worth the asking price when this game is on sale with all of the DLC included. I'd highly recommend people do give this game a go. If you're a fan of third-person shooters, if you're a fan of Souls games, this game definitely would appeal to you. I think that the shooting mechanics are tight enough and the controls are tight enough for it to be a quality third-person shooter, and I feel like the elements that it borrows from the Souls games, such as things like an Estus flask, stamina consumption on dodging, as well as things like bonfires and enemies respawning when you rest at the bonfire and things like that. I think everything is implemented into the game very well. And if I had to chuck a kind of a standardized baseline score out of 5 there, I think I could comfortably give this game a non-standardized 3.5.
No, I think that's a very fair assessment. It's not a 4 or 5 out of 5 game.
No.
And if you can get the Gotti for £15,
super worth it.
Absolute steal. You will have fun with it, particularly if you've got a friend who's willing to play with you. It's very good fun co-op. So.
Yes, yeah, absolutely that. I think that this game is fine to play on its own, a blast to play with a friend, though. Yeah. Absolutely.
So good, so good.
So, man, all in all, a very enjoyable experience. Thank you very much for recommending this game to me. Had a blast playing it. And yes, very pleased to have completed this challenge. The score is now 3-3, I believe.
Wow. I've done this challenge too. Do I get any...
Do you get a point for doing this alongside?
No.
You get a
absolutely, it's 3-3. I get nothing. It's absolutely 3-3. That's now
still in the game, baby.
Win, so I've essentially given you 2 of your points, but that's fine.
Yeah.
No, man, it's good. It's good. With the losing streaks are behind us now.
Yes.
Until you set me this.
Well and truly buried. Yeah. With all of that said, James, I think that's enough for my portion of the games challenge. However, as you well know, there is a second part to the games challenge, and I am very excited to reveal to you that my challenge to you this week to complete, that's right, James, It's a completion challenge. I want you to complete Evil Within.
Okay.
So, I deliberated on giving this challenge to you a little bit. There was a few other games that I had that were kind of really hanging out in the rafters there that nearly scooped this one off the top.
I was going to say Halloween is your wheelhouse, isn't
Yeah,
it? So
exactly.
you probably had a lot to choose
There's
from.
a tight
right?
competition for Halloween challenge titles, in
Yeah.
my mind at least. And I was even tempted to do your kind of pick a random number out of 3 and hope for the best as well. But ultimately, I settled on this as the title that you'll be playing this week. The Evil Within is a survival horror video game developed by Tango Gameworks and published by Bethesda Softworks. One of your favourite
That's my
publishers
guys
there,
right
James.
there.
Yeah, there
That's
you
my
go.
guys right there. Shout outs to Todd Howard. Just works.
It just works.
So, Evil Within was actually directed by Resident Evil series creator Shinji Mikami and was released worldwide in October 2014 for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Windows, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. This is a game that is not a subtle game, I'll say. You know, compared to some of the games that we've spoken about previously, like Silent Hill and things like that, a lot of sort of implied horror, eerie sound effects, fear of the unknown employed in this one. They took let's just say they took the Callisto Protocol school of game design in this one. You know, if
Chunks, baby.
Chunks, body horror, just absolute violence, enemies wielding chainsaws, death animations for your character out the waz, all sorts of pitfalls and traps in the game that will result in your character meeting a very grisly end. In this game, you play as a detective, I believe, called Sebastian, who is investigating a disturbance that's taken place within a hospital in the town. You experience some very interesting and significant occurrences while you're in the hospital, and before long, you are transported into a strange and paranormal world full of horrifying and torturous creatures. This game has it's got a lot of Resident Evil feel to it. There's a lot of survival horror going on.
Nice.
I think you'll have a blast with this game, man. How are you feeling, given the description that I've given you of the title so far?
I feel pretty good, man. I am aware of this game. I've seen analysis videos in the past, so I don't remember too much of it, but I know the sort of thing I'm getting into. Isn't there like one big overarching enemy that follows you around quite a lot throughout the game?
Yeah, he's showing up every so often, ominously foreshadowing the final boss, of course.
Honestly, after Condemned the other week, I'm itching to go for the next horror game. So yeah, man, strong shout. Looking forward to playing it and hopefully coming back next week and getting another W on the table. So
fantastic, man, and I wish you all the best of luck. With that, James, I think we've come to the end of the podcast. I think we're done for another week. What have we learned this week? This week, I have learned to not take medical advice or sign up to any medical procedures from individuals that I've met down the pub. Was that not the thing that I was supposed to have learned last week?
It was.
Okay, well,
but,
noted this time, this time I got noted.
Well, to be honest, man, a week, that's pretty good effort for you. So,
I retained that information. Solid 7 days.
You did. No, and I don't know if that's fair. He seemed all right.
He was all right.
Seemed like a nice person.
Yeah, it's all right.
Once you get past the grisly exterior and the language barrier initially, he was all right.
Animal carcasses.
Bit of animal carcass.
So as we draw this episode to a close, I'd just like to say, as always, a very special thank you to our listeners. We very much appreciate your support and interactions. We enjoy making this podcast every week. We're really looking forward to bringing a lot more new content to you in the future. We've had an absolute blast making these Halloween specials, and we're looking forward to putting on some interesting projects for you guys somewhere down the pipeline.
Thank you very much for your continued support. It means the world to us. Please do tell your friends. Please rate us 5 stars.
Spread the word. You can, as always, find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts by searching for Total Pod Mode. We also post regular video content of our playthroughs, stream highlights, as well as the podcast on our YouTube channel, Total Pod Mode.
And you can also find us on Twitter by searching for @TotalPodMode, all one word.
Or you can find me at Whodafunk on Twitter, and I'm also on Twitch under twitch.tv/Whodafunk.
And you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Bames, and I'm also on Twitch under twitch.tv/MrBames_TPM.
Well, James, I think it's time that we bring this episode to an end. Had a blast with you over this Halloween. We've been through a lot, man. I think we can return to a sense of normality next week. A brighter dawn, a nicer future.
I certainly hope so. Be nice to put all this spooky nonsense behind us.
Yeah. Things
for
are
now,
fine.
at least.